Or is it just some people who need these possessions to fill the void?
Yeah, but I wanted to ask a different question about things that people collect, and that has to do with the fact that sometimes what you collect and what you think is so important and what you want to pass on to other people is rejected by other people. Then what do you do?
What are you thinking of exactly?
You know, a lot of elderly people that I interviewed in my studies were very particular about what they owned and what they collected and what they wanted to pass on to their children. But the children didn't want them. And a lot of it created a lot of intense emotional anxieties for the elderly people that I interviewed.
That just show that it's not about the things at all.
The meaning.
Yes.
It's true. Their meaning, it's their symbolic value, it's the outlook that they represent that the children perhaps reject because they're living a different life.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's almost as if these possessions were collected with children in mind. Yet at the time when it came for dispossessions, these children were not ready for it. They didn't want it. They wanted to actually sell it.
I can completely identify with that anxiety. The idea that you have all these things around you, pictures, books, which you feel define you, and that when you go, they will disperse, and then you will scatter too. Your identity will be lost. I wanted to ask you something different, Yewande, about the novel, because the other thing that's very striking about it is that Leke spends all this time wandering through shopping malls, these sort of possession, if you like. Why did you place him there?
I'm concerned, maybe that's my sense of consumerism, just the plastic, so the shopping mall, this kind of hard, cold environment where you're getting that brand name, whatever it is for you. And if you get that bag or the shoes or the suit, it now means something. You're in a club, you're special, you are beautiful. And I'm concerned about those meanings. It's one thing to say, oh, I love this dress, my mother made it, it has this. It's another thing to say, that dress is why I'm sexy, or that is why, or if I smell that way, it means I'm beautiful. I don't know, I'm skeptical about those kind of associations.
I guess you must have thought about this quite a lot, because you trained as an architect, didn't you? And you were involved in the design of shopping malls in South Africa, which for consumers, they mean one thing, but for the people who design and build them and use them to gain profits, they mean something quite different.
Yeah, I was working in South Africa's kind of biggest shopping malls, and I just thought putting this character, I mean, Leke is isolated, he has no friends, he doesn't have a lot of money, he wants contact. And I just thought how interesting that he somehow gets into going to the mall. He thinks he could get it there. And these scenes where he's looking and he's trailing people and he's looking at people look at a wall of clothing, and it's not there. And I suppose maybe that's also just my own thing coming through there. And yet I know people who, when they're feeling down or sad, you know, a friend of mine says, well, I go get a new pair of shoes. I think, okay, that's all right, but there's also something, you know, can't we need to look at that as well as a society, that this is where we're going to. And it's interesting you use the word temple.
What did the process of designing a shopping mall, being involved in the design, what did it make you think, or what did you learn from that?
Well, when I was first hired, my boss at the time gave me a book, I think it's called The Science of Shopping. I don't know if anyone knows that. It was looking at it from the outside, so I wasn't the shopper. I was looking at the little tricks, really, you play to have people remain in the mall, have them buy more, where the certain stores put certain things on what shelves, at what height, you know, if it's full, if it's full, etc. I think for me, it's just the coldness of the calculation that goes into having people consume. And people aren't aware of it, so you're in the queue, and that's where the sweets are. You don't need it, but you see yourself reaching for it and buying it. And I was just interested in that impulse that people have and how that can be engineered by those of us who are designing the stores or designing the malls.
Well, we're going to come on to talk a bit more about marketing in part two. So hold on to your thoughts. We're going to stop now for a news summary.
The BBC World Service.
Witness tells the story of great moments in world history.
On the street leading down to the main road to Tiananmen Square, furious people stared in disbelief at the glow in the sky, listening to the sound of shots.
I don't think I actually felt fear. You don't know what to do.
Moments that were witnessed by real people.
The former Indian Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi, has been assassinated.
The crowd just froze for a brief second, and then everybody started to stampede and ran in all kinds of different directions.
Moments that shaped real lives.
I knew I was on borrowed time. That was obvious. So we just lived for the day.
History told by the people who were there.
I thought I had had a rendezvous with my girlfriend.
Witness on the BBC World Service. Every day.
Still to come on the forum, the secrets of retail therapy, why a good shopping trip may these days feel more like a visit to the theatre, and the clash between consumption and caring for the environment, the dirty little secret of clothes designed to fall apart after 10 washes. Insights from marketing analyst Dr. Anna Majoy, plus more from historian Philip Long and architect and novelist Yolanda Omotosho. So stay with us, we'll be back after the
BBC News with Jonathan Izard. North Korea has proposed a joint investigation with the United States into a cyber attack that led to Sony Pictures cancelling the cinema release of a comedy about a plot to murder North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It said the accusation by the FBI that Pyongyang was behind the attack was slander. The official news agency warned of grave consequences if Washington turns down the offer. Pakistan has announced it will execute more militant prisoners in the next few days, having lifted a moratorium in response to the school massacre in Peshawar on Tuesday. 2 prisoners have already been executed. Pakistan's government says soldiers are now helping to secure prisons before an attempt by the Pakistani Taliban to free fellow militants. Pakistani security forces say they've engaged with militants in several parts of the country and that dozens of insurgents have been killed. Sources quoted by Dawn reading the newspaper say the largest number, 20, died in jet fighter strikes in the Gulf area. Voting is underway in Liberia to elect new senators, despite fears that the casting of ballots might lead to Ebola spreading further. Voters are having their temperatures taken at polling stations and have been told to stand a metre apart. 10,000 bottles of hand sanitizer have been deployed. Youths in Guinea have prevented Médecins Sans Frontières from setting up an Ebola transit centre in the south, destroying equipment and chasing away medical staff. Correspondents say some people in West Africa fear that the centres increase the risk of catching the virus. Security forces in Saudi Arabia say they've killed 4 militants in a clash in a Shia village in the east of the country. The official news agency said one of the men killed a soldier last Sunday. And the chairman of Germany's Central Council of Jews has spoken out against the growing anti-Islamic protest movement called Pegida. Joseph Schuster told the German newspaper it was unacceptable that anti-Muslim sentiment was being manipulated to denigrate an entire religion. BBC News.
This is the forum from the BBC. Today, possessions. How much do they enrich our lives and how much do they burden us? And should we focus more on what we discard as well as what we acquire? But now, time for our 60-second idea to improve the world, and this week it's from historian and writer Philip Blom. The drill, Philip, is that you've got exactly 1 minute to sum up your idea and win me over. Bridget Kendall and my 2 other guests, anthropologist and professor of marketing Anna Majoy and award-winning African novelist Yolanda Omotosho. So, Philip, if you've collected your thoughts, off you go.
In the 1560s or thereabouts, men wore fantastically tight multicolored hoses, in which they would keep handkerchiefs or even fruit ready to be offered to a beautiful damsel. It makes you think differently about damsels in distress. The whole thing offers at least one lesson from history. Men, once you've passed 20, stay away from tight pants. Cycling shoes, even stretchy kin are their distant heirs, designed to show off your shapely legs and the taut outline of your tantalizingly sculpted posterior. Or not. Remember, other people only see what you really look like. This is why my 66 idea is to ban the stuff. Too often it is a container bulging with fantasies, foolishness, and fallacies. Clothes, after all, are like opinions. You have a perfect right to wear what you want, but you have no right to look what it is.
That was terrific, Philip. Thank you very much. So, stretchy synthetic fabrics. They have transformed the manufacture of clothing, haven't they? But presumably it's not the fabric that you're worried about, it's the people inside them.
Yes, exactly. They haven't only transformed the clothing. Or rather, they have transformed the clothing.
You know what? You seem particularly down on men in tights. I I'm wondering, isn't that a bit sexist? What about women in tight-fitting jeans? To be fair, shouldn't you ban them too?
Look, that's a kind of sexism that I'm quite happy with. On the other hand, but of course you're quite right. As I said, clothes are like opinions. You know, you have a perfect right to espouse them, but you have no.
Yolanda, what do you think?
When it first started, I thought you were going to say, bring back the men in tights. You know, bring back the old, when you talk about
that
the chivalry.
That would be another interesting idea.
Yeah, I thought, okay, bring back that, the chivalry with it,
whipping a piece of fruit out of your trousers.
Or handkerchiefs. I'm like, hey, you're finally, men are struggling to, make the first move now. So bring the tights back. That would be a way to open the conversation.
It would certainly be an interesting sight on a Friday evening. Yes.
What do you think, Anima?
I was thinking of a brand that sort of makes yoga pants, and they started making it with very see-through thin fabric, and a lot of women wear them, and of course, not all of them have the right figure, right? And apparently the CEO made a comment that only certain kinds of the right kinds of
But that's your idea does lead down that road, value judgment on whether the sculpted posterior is good for other people to see or not, and that's a tricky one.
It's always a tricky one, and I wouldn't want to be the dictator who imposes that. In the States, at the moment, I hear people say, use your best judgment, which is entertaining because I've never heard anybody say, use your second best judgment. But I think it's an open invitation for people to use their best judgment. Best judgment, including very possibly my own, is not always terribly good.
And what you'd say is, if in doubt, use fitting garb.
Duties in the eye of the beholder too,
Shut down.
It isn't always. I think, once 90% of the people who pass you on the street wish they hadn't seen you because you're going to haunt them in your dreams. It's not just the beholder.
Okay, well, many thanks, Philip Blom. And if you've got a response to that, or if you want to look through our other 60-second ideas or whole programmes, just go to our website for the contact details, bbcworldservice.com/forum. Now, we've talked about why people amass possessions and how they can give us a sense of belonging. But Anima Joy, your interest in our enthusiasm for acquiring more stuff is from a slightly different point of view. As Professor of Marketing in the Faculty of Management at the University of British Columbia, you look at patterns of consumer behaving and branding, both in the West and in some of the biggest emerging markets in Asia. And you mentioned in the research that there's been a shift from selling products and services to selling experience. Can you explain what's going on?
Sure. That's a good way to start. The notion that we've moved to delivering experiences. Companies have focused on that. And in my own studies, and I have chosen a very hedonistic group of things to study, like art and fashion and luxury brands and wine. And in my study on art experiences in a museum, for instance, one of the things that was very clear is that experiences are embodied. And so we identified the importance of sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, and how they arouse aesthetic pleasure, excitement, and a sense of discovery. So you don't have to have that experience just in a place like that. You can do that in retail outlets as well. And I was thinking of what Yolanda was saying earlier about shopping malls being cold. A lot of the research that I have done seems to suggest the opposite, and that is these are atmospheres of seduction, but created by retailers. But it is the creativity of the customer who's in the store that makes the whole thing alive. For instance,
I find it very surprising that you speak about the creativity of the customer, because surely that's the least creative thing possible, just to stuff yourself with pre-manufactured experiences spoon-fed to you by people who've invested huge marketing budgets.
Okay, so we are talking about Hong Kong and Beijing and New Delhi and so on. They spend large amounts of money buying luxury goods. But there is this level of comfort within these stores. For instance, some of these luxury stores in Hong Kong. And they seem to have some kind of an effect on the customers themselves. For instance, something simple as a glass staircase with digital images being played on it. Okay? So this causes an element of surprise to the customer to begin with. Just like Westerners sort of view the Mona Lisa at the Louvre, and I've seen this happen as well, where they walk towards the painting and away from the painting and enjoy the fact that her eyes watch them, right, as they move across the floor. So do the Hong Kong customers who ran up and down the digitally stairs in the luxury store.
So, if this, I was just wondering if this is in Asia.
Well, when I was thinking of it, it was particular kind of maybe this is definitely using for the creativity. Because I remember clearly when my boss hired me, she said, I'll be a shopper, I'll be wearing kind of nothing with any name in it. That's why I would say it's cold, but it's an aesthetic that appeals to a
I beg to differ. I mean, we think of shopping and marketing as a cold activity to make people buy. Buying is not just for accumulating things. Buying is a form of caring for somebody else or for yourself. And so you're not a dupe every time that you walk into a store and you buy a thing.
I always feel like a dupe. I noticed, for instance, for me, if I buy a suit and I buy the same suit in a dirt cheap outlet or in an expensive store, I feel better about it if I got it from the expensive store. Now, that doesn't speak for my intelligence.
People have made that argument about luxury goods versus fast fashion goods. Okay? They say the people who make them, the manufacturers, they've been told, okay, this particular brand, and so you use X number of items to sell that brand. Someone right next to them will be doing something for a lower price brand, pretty much the same kind of thing. And the whole notion of pricing is based on how much a particular product can be sold at, right? So there are price corridors. Yeah. So all of that is part of I think only tells a part of the story.
I wonder, is there something damaging? I guess if I'm coming from, I live in South Africa, if you talk about marketing, you look at what's being marketed, what's being sold. There's a sense of there's an ideal. And oftentimes that ideal looks a certain way. It's a certain body shape. It might be a certain race. It might be a certain kind of makeup or hair. I think maybe that's, for me, I look politically at it as well. There's a political lens to look at consumerism.
Obviously, this notion of the self that can be eternally remade is a very common idea across the world, but particularly in North America, I would say. But at the same time, I think now people are catching on to the fact if this sort of facility to continuously remake ourselves is possible, then why don't we choose a different way of remaking ourselves where sustainability becomes an important issue in terms of fashion?
Now this is interesting, isn't it? Because this is another thing. I'm very untrained up. So my you can still make very reasonable choices when you shop. Stuff which doesn't last very long, or which they're going to chuck away when the season's over, and not think about the fact that there's ways to go.
It is here that I agree with both Philip and that when it comes to fashion, part of the need for we're lucky to wear it before that.
I was shocked.
The quality is very low.
Adam, I was just wondering though, if these clothes have built-in obsolescence, and people must begin to realise that after they've bought them a bit, doesn't that make possessing these items less desirable and therefore diminish the experience of buying?
People are now questioning that. I think they realise that they have a kilograms of fabric that is trashed by each of us every year. That's a hell of a lot of stuff in the landfill, isn't it? And that's just, I think, a figure that I read about North America. I don't know about the rest of the world.
It makes me wonder, Philip, if this built-in obsolescence that we're hearing about? Is that something new? Because, you think also if you think about technology, there's so much discarded technology where everybody's upgrading all the time. This is surely to do with the pace of technological change, isn't it? Or do you think historically, actually, this always happened?
It's also to do with the market because, you buy things today that can't be meaningful way. So you have to buy new stuff all the time. But, it is perfectly horrifying to hear about this. And I think, this market is after our narcissism. To some degree, we are all narcissists. Narcissists don't, by definition, think about others. And the fact that, most of these things are made under conditions that we would qualify as slave labor. By 10-year-old children that were left with the nice small hands to do fine suits and things like that. And, we buy it to feel better about ourselves. And I think there's something to be said about the perspective there.
Do you think, Anima, that attitudes really are changing through this? Or do people have one thing in their heads when they're talking about this and like in this serious discussion we're having around this table, but then when they go into a shop and they're lured by some dress they like, do they really think about who's made it and how long it will last?
The companies that are making the most money today, the fashion companies, are also the ones that are classified as fashion. So it is, and I think it's a different, it's like fast food, right? We are concerned about health and wellness. Do you think the fast food companies are going out of business? No.
And also another thing, Bridget, I have to find it in my question. Of course, it's been a psychological mechanism. You buy something that you will know that you'll throw away because your whole identity is geared to the fact that you have to be up to the moment.
Do you think it's true, Anima, that we're losing the ability to distinguish between what we need and what we want when it comes to possessions?
I think consumer desire is very strong. And what we desire, of course, very strong culturally too. But we are not going towards the direction of buying in order to satisfy our needs. No. We're moving away from it. And we've been that way for a while.
I was just thinking, this Christmas season when we receive gifts, many of us, but we're also, we've been told that we really should talk more about the pleasure of giving, not receiving. So I wondered, all three of you, as we're coming to the end now, what are the chances of breaking this human habit of wanting to have more stuff, more possessions? Yoandi, what do you think?
For me, I think that the one thing is the numbing. That kind of instant gratification. I think it's easy to go into a shiny shop and get something shiny and feel good about it.
Anima, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. I think, we've got to ask, what are our values? What guides our actions? And where do we want to put our efforts? And I think those kinds of questions are being asked by every consumer. But some of my research has shown a lot of people are lured by what they see in the stores, as Randall said, but I'd like to still say that consumers are not total dupes. They know what they're doing. And if they want to do those kinds of things, they're also aware of it. The marketer cannot just make it to do things.
That's why civilization was invented. And I think if we are constantly driven to begin with our desires, then we become perhaps materially more proficient, but actually less civilized. Can we change that? We will be poorer in the West. We will be poorer materially, but I'm not that sure whether we'll be worse off. I think, perhaps we'll discover the meaning of a word like that.
An interesting thought to end with. Thank you very much, Philip Blom, Yoandi Omotosho, and Anima Joy. Next week, self-control, how we exercise it, and how we can strengthen it in this festive season, which for so many of us is associated with excess. But for now, that's it from me, Bridget Kendall, and all of us here at the Forum. And as usual, we end with birdsong. This one is recorded on the west coast of Canada, where you are, Anima. It's the Barrow's golden-eyed duck, a female calling to her young, and you can just hear them splashing across the water to join her.
An ally has been slain.
BBC.
Hello, this is Witness on the BBC World Service with me, Kirsty Reid. And today I'm taking you back to December 1989 and the surreal and parallel world of Romania under the rule of the communist dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu.
Electricity was strictly controlled, and the Securitate, the famous secret police, penetrated almost everywhere, in schools, in public places, in cultural institutions.
Zsolt Szilágyi was a 21-year student in the university town of Timișoara, in the west of the country.
So Romania was an absurd communist country, while other socialist countries like Czechoslovakia or Hungary or Poland opened the system, Romania closed its communist system. So we became the North Korea of Central East Europe.
The Securitate, Romania's feared secret police agents, were everywhere, informing on friends and neighbours, tapping phones. Despite the changes that had been taking place in other communist countries, in Romania, few people dared to speak out openly, and those who did, but in Timișoara, an ethnic Hungarian Laszlo Cho'Gatch, Zsolt Szilágyi first met him in his student flat. There were rumours. Perhaps Cho'Gatch was a Securitate agent. Perhaps he was bluffing. After all, he was been arrested for his outspokenness.
I felt after that if this person is working for the Securitate, there is no God on earth. I believe him, and I felt that he has such a charisma.
To know and respect Laszlo Cho'Gatch. And when it was announced that the prince was then Zsolt was one of the people who joined a candle-lit vigil outside the Turkish's home. It was the 16th of December, 1989, the beginning of Romania's anti-communist revolution.
People started to gather and to come together in the front of the house. A man was saying in Polish, we should stand together for a better life. Yes, absolutely spontaneously. Of course, we were penetrated by the agents. We were able to smell them, but...
smell them?
I mean to smell them in a symbolic way, of course. To identify them. Not totally identify, of course, because they were not in uniform. But we knew how they look. And we were aware that we are not alone. We are surveyed. When we arrived to the party headquarters, I realized that we were more than 1,000. And some of the people from the crowd entered in the party house. They started to throw out of the windows books about Ceausescu, even some furniture. But the crowd was saying, fără violență, fără violență, no violence, no violence. So the crowd spontaneously condemned the destroying attitude.
Then, Ceausescu's military machine began to kick into gear.
In less than an hour, a small team wearing black uniform, white helmet. They were equipped with wooden sticks. And we were started to run because the police was hitting us with the sticks, and we were able to go back to the campus, and our colleagues were not
What, the other students didn't believe that there'd been a demonstration, or they didn't believe the
I told them that, you know me, I'm not a liar. And they said, no, in Romania it's not true. So in the first phase, people just did not believe what is happening, because it was really unbelievable.
The next day, a Sunday, Zsolt, his girlfriend, and other friends from the university went back to the centre of town. Overnight, they had heard tanks rolling into Timișoara past their campus. The crowd was a mixture of Timișoara citizens, minorities and parents, and Zsolt. But there were ex-Romanians too, some of them singing old, communist Romanian anthems. As dusk fell, the military renewed their attack on the demonstrators. This time, they brought more than just weapons.
When the fight started, it was almost done. But 4 or 5 o'clock, I heard the first shootings. The crowd started to move. In the front of the opera, there is the cathedral. Part of the crowd went there and shouted "Libertate, libertate, freedom, freedom." We've seen the soldiers preparing their guns, and I told to my girlfriend, what's going on here? A public execution?
An enemy has been slain.
And she said, okay, let's go. Let's go from here because we can be shot.
Fearing for his life, Zsolt went into hiding at a friend's flat. He says that one of the worst things about the next few days, as shooting continued across the city, was the belief that no one outside knew what was going on in Timișoara.
I was able to call my mother. I was afraid to tell her what's going on in Timișoara because we knew that all inter-city calls are centered. So I just told her it is very hot. And she said, in December, Mom, it is real hot here.
And she understood what you said?
No.
Oh.
She reacted as a mother. She said, okay, take off your coat. So practically they had no news about the revolution.
But the news did get out.
There have been clashes between students and troops in western Romania. Thousands of people took to the streets in the town of Timișoara.
Within days, news of Timișoara's revolution had spread across the country to the capital, Bucharest. When President Nicolae Ceausescu tried to take back control of the situation from soon, even the police and the army were turning against Ceausescu. He and his wife had been tried and executed. Hundreds died in today's violence.
If I think about my life, these days I believe that freedom is very precious. Even now, it's very difficult for me to teach my kids how nice is the freedom, because you can feel the value of the freedom only when you are living without.
Zsolt Szilágyi is now a politician in Romania. He was speaking to me, Kirsty Reid, for Witness on the BBC World Service.
The BBC process.
We have the headlines.
Democracy protests have spread to new parts of Hong Kong.
But we go further.
I am on a pedestrian walkway looking down into the sea of people that have taken to the streets here.
The BBC World Service.
People here who've been living with war and tragedy for more than a decade are finding ways to get on with their lives.
The world.
If you missed Tech 10, we considered who is behind the cyber attack and online threat that forced Sony Pictures to pull a major new movie. Plus, we tried out real-time voice translation for Skype and heard how toys could bring robotics into the home. Catch us online at bbcworldservice.com.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to assignment to the BBC World Service. I'm Timothy Walton. I've got rare fighting not or for money, but out of conviction.
I go forward and I'm calm because I see my right way, because I'm going to defend, not to attack, not to be aggressive.
The volunteers aim higher, and some are accused of atrocities against civilians.
We have laws to shoot people. Someone needs to take responsibility for my son's death.
That's assignment in 5 minutes.
BBC News with Jonathan Izard. North Korea has proposed a joint investigation with the United States into a cyber attack that led to Sony Pictures cancelling the cinema release of a comedy about a plot to murder the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It's said by the FBI that Pyongyang is behind the attack was a spy. Stephen Adams reports from Seoul.
North Korea denied being behind the attack, suggesting on state media that it and the United States jointly investigated. In a tone hardly conciliatory, it said there would be dire consequences if the US didn't cooperate. The denial is unlikely to convince everyone. In South Korea, there was a unit of the military there called Euro 121, which hacks the websites of foreign organizations.
Senior advisor.
Carrying out the death sentence is never a pleasant task, nothing that one can be proud of. But the militancy and terrorism in Pakistan has convinced everyone in the country that the provision of our law, which envisages sentencing to death of those engaged in heinous crime, needs to be.
The government says soldiers are now helping to secure prisons to thwart any attempt by the Pakistani Taliban to free fellow militants. The security forces say they've engaged with militants in several parts of the country and a dozen insurgents have been killed. Voting is taking place in Liberia to elect new senators, despite fears that voting might help spread Ebola. Rights groups say they're worried about how transparent and credible the elections will be. The Supreme Court dismissed a case to have them delayed until the Ebola crisis was over. Mary Harper from our Africa Desk reports.
Strict measures are in place at polling stations to try to reduce the risk of spreading the disease. Voters are having their temperatures taken and have been told to stand a metre apart. 10,000 bottles of hand sanitizer have been made available. The President, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who has twice used emergency powers to postpone the poll, says it must go ahead this time to avoid the situation of crisis. She planned rallies in Arabia, where half the population lives.
Protesters in Geneva prevented a medical shower in the south of Syria. Police said people burned tents and chased away staff working for Médecins Sans Frontières in the town of Kisizubu. And the said it decided to build the centre following a recent spike in suspected Ebola cases in the area. Communities in some parts of West Africa have resisted efforts to deal with the epidemic, afraid they will catch Ebola from medical staff and in the treatment centres. BBC News. Security forces in Saudi Arabia say they've killed 4 militants in a clash in the east of the country. The official news agency said one of the men had killed a soldier last Sunday. The incident happened in the region of Al-Amiyah, which has seen a series of clashes between security forces and Shia militants. The head of India's governing Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, Amit Shah, a new law conversions high contempt. Mr. Shah said the BJP was the only party in India to oppose forced conversions and urged other parties to support possible new legislation. He has paralysed Parliament, with opposition parties refusing to tacitly approval of conversions to Hinduism in a few recent cases. The chairman of Germany's Central Council of Jews has spoken out against the growing anti-Islamic
a German acronym which translates as Patriotic Youth Appeals Against the Islamization of the West, is demanding tighter. The chairman of Germany's Central Council of Jews has now condemned the marches, and the Roman Catholic Church in Germany has also expressed its unease at plans for more anti-Islam demonstrations.